It's time again for the Urban Chicken Podcast. Hey, let's talk chicken. Welcome to Episode 4 of the Urban Chicken Podcast, where all things chicken are discussed and considered. On today's show, we are going to be discussing the egg versus the UnEgg. What the heck is an UnEgg? Wait for it. It's coming up in the show. I need to apologize right up front because today's show is going to be rather abbreviated. There is a good reason for this, though. I just spent the last 3 days driving to and from San Francisco from Boise. To put that in perspective, I spent 22 hours of those 3 days driving in the car back and forth. I gotta be straight with you. I got in yesterday at 1 a.m, and it has been a hectic day today trying to get this cobbled together for today's show. It had been my full intention to have a chicken news portion of the show, as well as a Sally Side Note segment. And in fact, I had actually recorded while on this trip a very clever interview for Sally Side Notes today. Unfortunately, technology is not always my friend. Actually, technology is my foe most of the time. Anyways, my digital recorder has decided to corrupt one file. And of all the files that could have become corrupted and irretrievable, it had to be the one interview that I intended to put on today's show. So that being said, I cannot make that happen for today's show. Instead, I'm just going to cut the Sally Side Notes for today. And I'll try and contact that interviewee and see if I can re-record that interview for you next week. I do apologize. It will be a completely full, jam-packed, all the bells and whistles show next week. Thank you for your patience. All right, enough said about that. Let's get right into the main segment of today's show. The title is Egg versus UnEgg. The same problem, different solutions. This past weekend, I was in San Francisco on business, and I decided, well, if I have to be there anyways, why not check out the urban chicken scene? And I found some pretty interesting chicken-related stuff in San Francisco. One of the groups I found when researching San Francisco and chickens or eggs is a 1-year-old venture capital startup called Hampton Creek Foods. And if you're familiar with the San Francisco area, it's located in the Soma District. Interestingly enough, the Hampton Creek Food office is located pretty close to other tech startup offices such as Twitter and Zynga. However, Hampton Creek Foods is a different sort of tech startup than its neighbors in that it's a sustainable food startup. Hampton Creek Foods has developed a product it calls Beyond Eggs, which is a laboratory-created egg derived from all plant sources. The Hampton Creek Food research team studied 287 different types of plants and has created over 344 prototypes for their egg yolk product. They claim their current recipe for Beyond Eggs includes such ingredients as peas, canola, sunflower lecithin, I don't know, it's one of those things that you can't read on the back of a product label, and natural gums. The head of Hampton Creek Foods, Josh Tetrick, stated that he believes that the food industry is broken and that he is hoping to disrupt the global egg industry with his plant-based synthetic egg product, Beyond Eggs. Indeed, Hampton Creek Foods on its webpage contends that unlike a commercially produced egg, which is produced under inhumane conditions and has a large carbon footprint and requires large amounts of water to produce those eggs, that its product, Beyond Eggs, is a much more sustainable product in all of those factors. I think we can all agree that industrial chicken factories are truly inhumane. The average hen in a typical industrial egg factory is kept locked up in a wire cage its entire life. Each hen is only given about one single sheet of writing paper's worth of living space. These birds are often debeaked due to pecking issues caused by the overcrowding. And I think it's also noteworthy that millions of male chicks are killed each year just as they are sexed by these industries and deemed not useful to the industrial egg business. Political pundit Gerald Celente has euphemistically named these industrial egg businesses Chicken Auschwitz, and the name does seem fitting. Things have become kind of complicated, though, for a consumer of eggs who would like to vote with their dollars and support humane chicken businesses. The task in trying to find a truly humane egg has become an untenable exercise in semantics for the consumer. Agribusiness has manipulated terms that would seem easy to understand to have very different meanings in reality. For example, the term cage-free sounds pretty humane and worth extra money spent to allow hens to live outside of a cage. However, the reality is that though these birds are not kept in cages, they are also not allowed to run free out of doors as one might assume. These birds are kept locked up inside of large hangars in still rather overcrowded conditions. These birds will also never spend a day out of doors their entire lives. The consumer might then turn to free-range eggs to try and do right by the poultry producing their eggs. But still, reality doesn't live up to the perception with this term. These so-called free-range birds are still given cramped quarters in a rather large hangar, but are now provided one small door to a caged area out of doors that is actually not even large enough to hold all of the birds. These so-called free-range eggs come from birds that are not actually freely ranging on any land. It turns out that if you actually want to buy a humanely produced egg, that you need to purchase one that is pasture-raised. This is truly a complicated labyrinth of egg lexicon, and probably the average shopper does not even know or understand that there is even a difference between cage-free, free-range, and pasture-raised eggs, or what those differences mean. I am going to be linking to a really brilliant video in today's show notes that articulately explains all the different types of eggs that are out there for purchase. I really do encourage you to check out this video in today's show notes as it's pretty short and really informative. So we as backyard chicken keepers or people interested in backyard chicken keeping and Hampton Creek Foods CEO Josh Tetrick are all on the same page that the average industrial produced egg is done so in a really inhumane manner. However, the backyard chicken keeper and Hampton Creek Foods is trying to answer that problem in radically different ways. It's interesting that Hampton Creek Foods isn't really focusing its energy on marketing itself as a specialty eco-food or even as a vegan product. Rather, the company is seeking to become a partner for very large food industries such as Kraft, General Mills, etc. Hampton Creek Foods is arguing that their fake egg is remarkably cheaper than the traditionally produced egg and can be used to create the same quality and tasting products. So Hampton Creek Foods is really looking to have major food companies such as Kraft dump the use of a traditional egg in their products and replace that out with their Beyond Egg synthetically produced egg. If Hampton Creek Foods can really pull this off and become a partner with Kraft and General Mills and all these other large food producers, then Tetrick might be right, and Hampton Creek Foods might be the company that does actually devastate the global egg industry. This would be similar to synthetic vanillin destroying the vanilla bean industry about 70 years ago. Is this UnEgg all that it's cracked up to be, though? Hampton Creek Foods claims that its Beyond Egg product is healthier and more earth-friendly than an actual egg. Yes, a plant protein concocted fake egg would be cholesterol-free, but would it also be missing the nutritional benefits of an actual egg, such as omega-3s, vitamin D and E, and other essential nutrients? Studies continue to demonstrate that the more processed a food is, the more its nutritional value is actually depleted. So that really begs the question as to whether a laboratory-created egg could ever come even close to an actual egg in providing digestible, usable nutrients to the human body. One can't help but be dubious of Hampton Creek Foods' other lofty claims as being more earth-friendly, by claiming their process will use less water and have a smaller carbon footprint. Now, it's hard to determine or even speculate as to how much water Hampton Creek Foods will actually need. So it's hard to discuss that issue. However, their claim to having a smaller carbon footprint than an actual egg may ring a little bit hollow. Does creating a fake egg require less carbon input and create less carbon output than to produce an actual egg? Well, it would seem that all depends on what you're comparing it to. Hampton Creek Foods compares its product only to large factory-produced eggs, thereby ignoring that there is actually another alternative which lies somewhere between these two extremes of either creating a Franken egg or having actual eggs produced in repugnant chicken Auschwitzes. The third option would be smaller farms producing actually truly pasture-raised eggs. These would be chickens who are kept in smaller flocks and allowed to roam around outside, supplementing their diet with grass and bugs and table scraps, and leaving their manure behind where it falls to feed the soil there. A Mother Jones article from 2010 actually challenged the assumed wisdom that the vegetarian option was always more sustainable and earth-friendly than its meat alternative. The article actually argued and showed that processed vegetarian fare, so for example, that would be like a vegetarian soy burger, actually required just as much carbon input as its meat counterpart. The all-vegetarian produced faux eggs that Hampton Creek Foods is making would clearly be a highly processed food. And so whether their carbon input would be smaller than an actual egg, especially one that was raised in a smaller pasture-raised environment, is highly questionable. One also really has to question how earth-friendly the ingredients are in the Beyond Eggs product. For example, Hampton Creek Foods listed canola as one of the key ingredients in making its phony eggs. Canola is produced from rapeseed, and 90% of all rapeseed in America and Canada is genetically modified. There are some very serious health concerns associated with eating GMO foods such as canola oil. One of those concerns being that Roundup Ready rapeseed already has a pesticide herbicide systemically placed inside the plant's DNA. And so you are definitely eating that pesticide herbicide in every single bite you take because it's systemically placed inside the plant, not on top of the plant topically. Additionally, there are other significant arguments against GMO crops, for example, regarding their effects on beneficial insects, such as pollinators like bees and butterflies. It is suspected that bees and butterfly populations may be in decline actually due to contact with GMO crops. Another concern with GMO crops is that their prevalence is actually creating superweeds and superbugs, which have developed a tolerance to the pesticidal, herbicidal genetic modifications of these crops. So what about the third option? A truly pasture-raised egg. Now, detractors will argue that this is not a practical option. It just isn't scalable. I'm actually not so sure about that. One restaurant bakery in Reno, Nevada is actually proving that it is possible to have small-scale, truly free-range pastured chickens and eggs be connected with a restaurant and have it be not only sustainable, but also cost-effective. The Wet Hen Cafe in Reno, Nevada is owned by a mother-son duo, Jackie Handlin and Brandon Wade. Jackie and her husband raise a medium-sized flock of chickens in their own yard, and it is from these chickens that produces all of the eggs that are used in the restaurant. These birds are allowed to truly free range and forage for food and bugs, and are also fed kitchen scraps from the restaurant. Co-owner Brandon Wade explained to me in an interview that they are only required to spend about $150 to $200 a year in supplemental feed for the birds. Otherwise, the birds do totally live off of scraps from the restaurant and also foraging. The cost of this family keeping their own egg supply for their own restaurant is actually cheaper than buying commercial eggs and actually provides a better product for their customers. Moreover, it encourages a synergistic relationship between the birds and the restaurant. Another idea for providing truly pastured eggs are egg cooperatives. The idea would be that smaller egg producers of pastured hens would pull together and sell their eggs under one label. This is how a lot of large organic milk companies operate. Many different small family farms provide milk into one company, and that milk is sold under one label. In a similar manner, there are urban chicken keepers that are selling their excess eggs locally in some cities under this same methodology on a smaller scale. Ultimately, it all comes down to market economics. The market will produce whatever the market demands. Large farms could move to a more humane, rotating pasture system to raise their chickens and to provide eggs, very similar to the methodology that Joel Salatin uses on his famous polyface farms in Virginia. The market does respond to demand. I mean, just think back a few years ago when you couldn't even find organic food at a normal supermarket, and now it is pretty much, at least in some quantity, at all grocery markets. We all have the ability to influence the market, and we do that by voting with our dollars. And this includes with what kind of eggs we choose to buy and consume. Now, I know the Nancy naysayers out there will say that healthy, humane food options just aren't as cheap as the mass-produced counterparts. I actually have two thoughts in response to this. First, when enough of the market votes with their dollars and changes the marketplace, the prices will come down because that item would no longer be a specialty item, but would be more of a mass staple. Second, the marketplace always provides value for equivalent value. So if you want to spend 99 cents on a food item, you're only going to get, at most, 99 cents worth of food value. More simply put, you get what you pay for. If a person wants to make food the area of their budget that they are going to be the most miserly about, then the quality of food that that person gets in return will be commensurate to the cash outlay. In the end, food cheapskates might actually find that inexpensive food holds some pretty significant hidden costs, and those hidden costs may include lack of nutrition, future health problems, and also being unearth friendly. What can we take from all of this as backyard chicken owners? Well, that there is real value in raising at least some of our own food sources. The more of us that keep our own backyard chickens and produce our own eggs and thereby opt out of the industrial egg market, we are also disrupting the global egg industry. And unlike Hampton Creek Foods, we are doing it in a simpler, more wholesome manner than having to engineer phony eggs. Well, that's all I have for today's show. Thank you so much for joining me on this week's episode. Be sure and listen in next week as I bring you some interviews with backyard chicken keepers actually living in San Francisco. Please be sure and visit the webpage located at www.urbanchickenpodcast.com for all of today's episode show notes. In the show notes, you will find lots of links to articles about Hampton Creek Foods. You'll also find a link to the Mother Jones article I mentioned, as well as links to other resources I used in today's show. I also encourage you to go ahead and visit the webpage so you can email me your chicken questions, your chicken stories, or maybe even just make a suggestion to me as to who you would like to hear interviewed on this show or what future show topics you would like to hear. I truly would love to hear from you. Until next time, me and the chickens here wish you a good week. See ya! Thanks for listening to the Urban Chicken Podcast at www.urbanchickenpodcast.com. The theme music used on the Urban Chicken Podcast is Jenny's Theme, written and performed by Jason Shaw. You can find this at freemusicarchive.org. See you next week.